So ladies and gents, we're just waiting for people to join the meeting now. So we've got about 30 that are already in. So in about 2 minutes time, the meeting will start. So just bear with us for a few moments, please. So we'll start in about 1 minute's time, ladies and gentlemen. We're just waiting for the last few participants to join the meeting, and then we'll commence. So right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the President of Victoria Golf Club, Mrs. Sue Hosking, who will chair the extraordinary meeting of members of the Victoria Golf Club.
Thank you, Peter, and I'm delighted to host this virtual meeting of the Victoria Golf Club. We have had 116 members register their intention to participate, and on behalf of the board, I welcome you to the meeting. I'd also welcome our life members, our pastees and the Women's Committee to this meeting. The directors have called this meeting in accordance with the club's rules. The board was hoping, obviously, that we'd be able to hold this meeting at the club in the normal manner. However, the impact of the COVID pandemic makes this impossible. The business of the meeting was advised to members in the notice of meeting that was circulated on the 7th of August 2020 electronically. I also note that those members who don't have an email in the club system were manually sent the information. The notice of meeting as distributed shows 2 items. Item 1 is a special resolution to change the club's rules as outlined in the notice of meeting, and shortly I'll introduce the captain to speak to the motion. The second item concerned a special resolution to change the club's rules with regards to the sale of property. It was subsequently withdrawn as the matter is better handled in the traditional meeting format, and there's no urgency to consider that matter. Now, before I introduce the captain, there's a couple of administrative matters. The notice requested that questions be provided by the 28th of August 2020. I note that there was one question about the process of this meeting, but not specifically about the content of the resolution. A reply was provided to the member that satisfied him. In summary, the matter was that this format for conducting the EGM is appropriate in these unusual times. It's typical of what peer organisations have been doing, and importantly, it's acceptable under corporations law. Members can use the technology to ask a question. Use the Q&A facility on your screen. And a reminder, please keep your questions to the topic of the resolution. After the captain presents the motion, he will address any questions prior to the motion being put. Voting has been online since the notice of meeting was distributed. For those members who wish to vote, the link is included on the notice, which you can find on the club's website or on the confirmation email you received after registering to attend this meeting. And I note that no proxies have been received. I also note that some matters were raised by members and they have been addressed in the frequently asked questions document on the website. Once the captain has completed his presentation, I'll announce that the voting will close in 5 minutes. And I'll announce the actual time. We expect to be able to announce the outcome of the vote at that time. Once we've finished the presentation about the special resolution, we'll have 5 minutes. And during that time, David will provide you with some general comments about club matters. Now, the general resolution is to consider and, if thought fit, to replace the existing Rule 41, election of officers and directors, with the proposed wording as outlined in Annexure 1. The resolution requires a 75% majority to be passed as a special resolution. I'm now delighted to introduce the Captain, David Brophy, to talk to the motion.
Thank you, Sue, and welcome members. Members will recall last year was the first time for some years that we had an election. The election highlighted shortcomings in the club's rules as they related to the voting process. And this led to the board undertaking a review of those rules and also the practices in place for elections. The rules in place last year were quite clear. The only manner in which a vote could be undertaken was using the postal system. Obviously, in these days of technology, there are more efficient and alternate methods of conducting a vote. The inadequacies of the postal service became even more apparent when a section of the membership living in Brighton didn't receive the paperwork in a timely manner. While we haven't determined which electronic process will be utilised to conduct an election, the proposed changes to the articles will permit such technology. Clause E of the proposed Article 41 will allow for the election to be conducted in a manner that the board sees fit and allow for the use of a suitable electronic voting system. It also retains the ability that those members who don't have access to technology to continue to use the postal system. Other significant changes described in Annexure 1, which is covering the resolution, relate more to the timing aspects of the election process. The new Clause B specifies that the nominations for election are to open 35 days before the AGM. The previous rules didn't specify when they should open, and the board believes that having a clear direction in this manner will improve the process overall. Clause C refers to when nominations close. It is proposed that they will close 21 days prior to the AGM, noting the existing rules close nominations 14 days prior. This needs to be considered in the context of another change in Clause E to increase the voting period. This change in Clause E proposes that the voting commences at least 14 days prior to the AGM, noting the old rules had voting commenced just 7 days prior. It is thought that 2 weeks is a more appropriate time frame for the voting to commence and enables the voting period to be longer than in the past. Also in Clause E, the voting is defined to close 3 working days prior to the AGM. As the technology is most likely to be undertaken externally, it is appropriate to allow more time prior to the AGM to enable the necessary review and reporting to be undertaken. The final change is in Clause F, and it's a change in phraseology where we've introduced the term returning officer to replace the previous tellers. The returning officer is considered to be a more contemporary phrase and reflective of the role that's performed by the returning officer. It also facilitates a person not being a member of the club, such as an officer of the external company providing the election technology, to undertake such duties. Before I move on to briefly talk about the changes to the practices relating to elections, a member has queried the wording specifying when the publication of the list of nominations will occur. The resolution states that it will be published no less than 2 days following the closing of nominations. This perhaps illustrates the imprecise nature of the English language, and to remove any uncertainty, the board at the October AGM will propose a special resolution to change the wording to read within 2 days, thereby removing any potential for confusion. Members will have seen other communication recently about changes to election practices. Key amongst these was the introduction of an expression of interest process that facilitates members who wish to be considered for future board positions. Our first experience of the process this year has been very positive, with a number of high quality candidates putting their names forward. Additionally, we're looking to improve the communication that is provided to members when nominations open, providing greater clarity about matters related to the election. So the sort of information that will be provided will include the positions that are subject to election at the AGM, the candidates whose nominations will be endorsed by the board, the process by which other candidates may follow should they wish to nominate for a position, the voting process and how it's to be undertaken, and how the announcement of the results of the election will be advised. The board believes that these changes in practices and the changes subject to this special resolution will see an improved election system with increased transparency. This is considered essential to the ongoing good governance of the club. I will now address questions that have been asked, and I'll start with some that came in prior to the meeting. So picking up, Sue actually probably covered this one. We had a question about who could attend and vote at this EGM. Only members can participate. So the technology being used requires members to pre-register prior to attending, as you're all aware. The voting system requires members to identify themselves by name, which has been cross-referenced to the membership roll. So only members can attend, and certainly only members can vote. Another question related to the use of the technology being Zoom for this EGM and the conducting of an EGM and the voting for a special resolution using Zoom and related technologies. Effectively, unusual times require different approaches. The conduct of business such as this EGM is consistent with how our peer clubs have handled their general meetings and in full accord with the guidance provided by ASIC with respect to the conduct of virtual meetings in these unusual times. This extends to the ASIC guidance that voting should be available prior to the meeting, which has been the case, obviously, in this case. We had a question about the suitable electronic voting system as described in the resolution that will be used for any election of officers and directors of the club. The board is yet to consider which voting system will be used. However, members can be assured that the voting system will provide confidentiality and all the necessary checks and balances. The board will ensure that the third-party provider is suitably credentialed to undertake the project. The board will announce an appointment when it is made. One other concern that came in was related to the role of the secretary, in particular the handing of the report from the electronic voting system by the secretary to the returning officer. Would this impact the integrity of the voting process, and would it be better supported, would the integrity be better supported if the report went direct from the voting system to the returning officer? The conduct of an election through a third-party electronic voting system introduces an increased level of complexity for the club. It's appropriate that the club, through the secretary, liaises with the third-party provider rather than leaving it to a returning officer who doesn't have a broader responsibility to act on behalf of the club. This is typical of the process in other organisations and adds a level of rigour to the system. The board is comfortable with the process as supporting the needs of the club and providing appropriate levels of integrity. Those were the questions that were prior. Are there any?
Mr. Captain, no further questions have come in that I'm aware of. So,
if there are no further questions, Sue, I think that outlines the changes that are subject to the special resolution. So perhaps you might now advise members that the voting is to close in 5 minutes and we can proceed.
Thank you, David. I now put the special resolution, and it is to consider and, if thought fit, to replace the existing Rule 41, election of officers and directors, with the proposed wording as outlined in Annexure 1. It's moved by the Captain David Brophy and seconded by the Honorary Treasurer Forbes James. The voting will now close in 5 minutes, which is at 7:20. It's now 7:15, and hopefully we'll have a result shortly after that time.
So, sorry, there are 2 questions have come in. Mr. Captain, There's a question from Peter Ficken as to whether there would be a cost to the provision of a third-party supplier to conduct the vote.
I would believe the answer would be yes, but we haven't gone any further than in terms of pursuing it, but I would fully expect yes.
And another question's come in from Chris Falkingham, which asked, did the Secretary have access to the votes before tonight's meeting?
I believe the Secretary did. I'm not aware of what the votes are, but the Secretary would have had access to the votes. He was managing the process.
Thank you. They're the only two that have come in since.
Okay. So 5 minutes we've got. So I just thought I'd fill the sorry, there's one late one from Jeff Park. I'll just answer quickly. Yeah, so I assume that applies to the expression of interest process. Yeah, the process required anyone who was interested to provide a brief summation of their experience, skills, etc. So yeah, it's not a formal CV per se, but certainly the key attributes, key experiences, key skills, key interest points, etc. And that's followed up by an interview process with the president and the captain. So I have a few minutes, so I just thought it'd be opportune to provide some updates, although updates in the current world are a little difficult with still uncertainty around us. I'm reasonably sure that we'll all be listening on Sunday to the government's roadmap for our return, and sincerely hoping that we get some sort of all clear to return to playing golf and enjoying the activities at our beautiful golf club. So a quick update on finances. There's nothing significantly new to report. The club is in a sound position. Membership renewals have been strong. JobKeeper continues to provide important support. Debt repayments are manageable. Importantly, we do believe the club will continue to be eligible for JobKeeper post-September when the rules change. But based on the analysis done by the Treasurer and management, we believe we will still fit the criteria as they've been most recently advised, albeit the payment levels will reduce in line with government announcements. The annual report will provide details about the impact of COVID on the last year's financial results. Obviously, the last 4 months of the financial year, particularly the last 3 months, were impacted. For 2021, it's early days. July was a tricky month. We were in the process of scaling up operations as restrictions were easing, and we were building to, I think it was 50 or to a room the day before they announced that we were going back to no hospitality and shutting us down again. So a very difficult month to manage. August has been different, with the club effectively in full close down, and we fully expect that to be financially beneficial for that month and for the remaining 2 weeks of the close down in September. The golf course, I don't think the golf course knows what's up for. It's had 2 unexpected rests, giving the green staff, although working on restricted hours doing essential maintenance, a great opportunity to have the course in terrific condition for our expected return to golf. We just need that green light from the authorities. Areas like the golfing program, well, obviously it's been severely impacted. We don't know what we'll be able to do, but the priority will be the major events such as the club champs, and whether we can, fit any board events in will be dictated as much in part by what we're allowed to do as how much time we've got left in the year. But the priority will be club champs, I would expect at this point. I mentioned the expression of interest process. It has been a very positive experience for the board in the short time we've been involved with it. And I'm hoping for those that were the very well-credentialed candidates to put their names forward. We thank those members for that. It's so far proved to be an exciting new process, and I think it will help with that transparency around how the board operates and provide opportunities for the broader membership to get involved. As I said before, the President and I are now interviewing the candidates. As part of the process of board renewal, we're looking to replace 2 directors this year who complete their time on the board, and also with an eye to future years as other positions become available. The board at its meeting last week signed off on the club's, or the board's, first charter. It's been a number of months in the making and provides an important piece of the club's governance framework. The board charter defines the responsibilities of the board and management, and importantly, how those responsibilities relate to each other. It's an important piece. It's probably not the sexiest piece of information we can provide, but we think from a governance perspective, it will really help the operation of the board now and ongoing into the future. A link to the board charter will be provided in Saturday's member update for members to peruse at their leisure. Perhaps a little more exciting is my next topic. We have a webinar coming up, and tomorrow there will be some information sent to members announcing that there's a webinar to be held featuring Kari Webb, Australia's best female golfer and maybe a strong claim to be Australia's best golfer. So that should be a very exciting session to hear from Kari. So watch your emails tomorrow for details on that. Playing arrangements, can't really update you, but we will as soon as we can, as soon as we've got any practical information. We're hoping, we'll start to get information at the back end of this week, over the weekend, early into next week. So we'll let you know. A reminder, we initiated a member wellness program reflective that there's some tough times happening. It starts tomorrow. We still have vacancies available, so please visit the website for details. And if you want to make a late registration, you can do it via the website. So just looking forward to next steps, it is difficult to set a plan in this lockdown period. I think Forbes and the CFO and the general manager and us more generally as a board have had about 3 or 4 or 5 goes at budgets over the last few months, and we're backed off at the moment waiting for things to become a bit clearer. So it's difficult to plan. We've got a stable base at the moment. Sunday's roadmap is hopefully going to provide a degree of clarity so we can set an agenda for a reasonable period of time going forward. As soon as we have information, we'll advise members. So it's as best we can do at the moment. So I'll finish there. Let's hope we're able to finish the year on and up. So back to you, Sue. I hope the numbers are just about in.
Thank you, David. And yes, they are. I'd like to announce that the special resolution has been passed. There were 173 votes cast, and it was passed by 96% votes to 4% against. I'd like to thank you all for coming in this unusual way. It's now my traditional task to open the bar, but unfortunately you now have to open your own bar, but I'm sure that, like me, you can hardly wait to open the bar at the club. I don't even have to say safe travels. Thank you. Good night all.